Hello and welcome to the program UFO Warning. In this episode, we're talking about UFO reports from Illinois. That's correct, UFO reports from Illinois. Found these over at Nuforc.org. As always, lots of really cool reports over there. This first one's dated January 17th, 2026 at 8 p.m. local time. It says duration 7 seconds, observers 1, location Chicago, Illinois. Shape rectangle, color gunmetal gray, estimated size half the size of a minivan, viewed from land. Direction from viewer, I was looking to the right as the car turned left. Angle of elevation 45 degrees. Closest distance, it was less than 50 feet above the ground. Estimated speed 0. Boy, that sounds like this thing was just right on top of this person. Characteristics, lights on object, marks later found on body. Wow. Completely flat, 2D, gray rectangle about half the size of a minivan, tan lights on 3 corners, and 1 pale green light. Now, remember, this is 8 o'clock in the evening in January, so probably dark out. I was leaving my friend's house and being driven home at about 8 p.m. in the middle of January, sometime between January 15 and January 17th, 2026. I was sitting in the passenger seat, and another friend was in the back seat. As we turned a corner, all the Chicago street lamps were lit up. Out of the corner of my eye, about 10 to 20 feet above 4 street lamps, I saw a completely flat, 2D rectangle about half the size of a minivan. It was frozen in the sky. No propellers, no visible propulsion, no hovering motion, nothing. It looked as if someone had pressed pause on a remote control and the object was just suspended there. The craft was gunmetal gray and completely flat. It had circular lights on every corner. 3 of the lights were pale beige, while the bottom left corner had a larger circular light with an inner ring and an outer ring that glowed a pale green color. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds. I yelled for my friend to look, but they did not turn their heads in time, although one almost did. I wish I had captured it on camera. It appeared tangible and solid, but it was not 3D in any way, shape, or form. There was no movement, no hovering motion, and no sound. I watched it clearly the entire time it remained visible. As we turned away, I never saw it move. The strange part was that it was positioned directly outside my friend's second-floor apartment building where we had just been, almost as if it were watching us. There was absolutely no noise coming from the object. It was completely silent and visibly suspended in the air. After the sighting, strange markings began appearing on my body, and they are still occurring. I have photographs of the markings, although I did not get a picture of the craft because the event happened too quickly. That is weird. Yeah, I don't know about these markings. They don't really say what they are. I don't know if this would be something just coming off the craft. Maybe something's happened later. This would be one of those cases where I would say it warrants further investigation. Very strange all the way around. This sighting is dated November 11th, 2025, 11:13 p.m. local time. Duration 37 minutes. Observers 2. Location Bloomington. Details Mill Creek area. Static object approximately 500 feet in the air. Shape orb, color gold. Estimated size possibly the size of a refrigerator or small room. Viewed from land. Direction from viewer, started at my 1 o'clock position and moved to my 5 o'clock position as I drove westbound toward Danvers. Angle of elevation 45 degrees. Closest distance 750 to 1,000 feet. Estimated speed at least 75 to 100 mile per hour. Characteristics, animals reacted. A golden orb approximately 500 feet in the air above the Mill Creek woods frightened animals, causing them to run onto the roadway away from it. The object moved rapidly in an unbelievable display. I was driving from Bloomington to Danvers to pick up my daughter from work. While driving, I noticed a large number of deer and raccoon on the road, apparently running away from the Mill Creek area. That was when I saw a golden orb approximately 500 feet above the woods. It was moving in a rapid, almost yo-yo-like circular motion. I had called my wife to tell her how bizarre it was, which frightened her as well. By the time I arrived in Danvers and returned, the object was gone and the animals were heading back into the woods. I also observed a helicopter in the area heading toward Bloomington. I am not sure what it was, even after checking flight trackers, but the timing seemed odd considering what had happened. I have never seen an orb or anything like this before. The object maintained a mostly stationary position and did not travel elsewhere. It remained in place while swinging around in a circular loitering pattern, almost like it was holding position. What was especially bizarre was that despite being a bright light, it did not cast any visible illumination downward. It appeared to glow without actually lighting up the surrounding area, almost as if it were a false light or some kind of visual trick. The speed at which it spun was unreal, and it was completely silent. Yeah, just one of these strange orb sightings. I mean, the fact that they can actually see this thing spinning, and the fact that the animals reacted to it, I find that very interesting. We have another orb sighting here. This one from November 11th, 2025. Duration 17 hours, 8 minutes, and 21 seconds. Well, that's pretty exact. Observers, one military/aviation expert. Location at Bloomington. And then they give the GPS coordinates. Shape orb, color white. Estimated size, given the distance, approximately 1 to 2 yards in diameter. Viewed from land. Angle of elevation 34 degrees. Closest distance 15 to 20 miles away. Speed impossible to determine. Possibly several 100 miles per hour. Characteristics: lights on an object, aircraft nearby. Illuminating orbs that repeatedly appeared and disappeared with no human origin and displayed two distinct behaviors. I consider myself a relative skeptic in the field of unidentified aerial phenomena. I do not disregard legitimate claims, but I believe most civilians who report seeing UAPs are unfamiliar with how commercial and military aircraft appear in the night sky and how satellites can sometimes be mistaken for UFOs or UAPs. The same applies to military munitions at night. Artillery illumination rounds and aircraft flares can appear unusual from a distance. After extensive deductive reasoning, I initially believed this sighting might have had a conventional explanation, but I no longer think that is the case. As a former military U.S. Army from 2012 to 2016, stationed at Fort Hood, I worked around illumination rounds and observed military aircraft deploying flares. I have never seen anything like this before. Additionally, I am a longtime aviation enthusiast and can usually identify aircraft at night based on their flying patterns. Over the years, any unusual light pattern I observed in the sky was eventually explained through research or logical analysis. Until now. On November 11th, 2025, at approximately 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, in the redacted area, all of my previous reasoning failed. I had pulled into a grocery store parking lot to speak with a family member on the phone when I noticed lights along the upper horizon. I was facing west-northwest and observed dozens of orb-like lights appearing, moving either left or right, then suddenly disappearing. Every 15 to 20 seconds, the same pattern repeated. Their movements were erratic. At times, the objects made small hooking maneuvers. Some might speculate they were military flares, but there are two major problems with that explanation. First, several of the lights appeared parallel to the horizon and moved horizontally across the sky. Second, military flares do not behave in this way. Flares descend from an aircraft and fall toward the ground or horizon. They do not travel rapidly away from their point of origin in controlled horizontal patterns. Others may suggest the objects were drones, but both the lighting characteristics and movement dynamics were completely unlike any drone activity I have observed. As an aviation enthusiast, I also checked Flight Radar 24 during the event. There was no aircraft activity in the immediate vicinity other than occasional civilian jets heading toward O'Hare International Airport or Midway International Airport. Additionally, there are no known military training ranges located hundreds of miles in the west direction from my position. I am submitting this report because the deductive reasoning that has explained approximately 99.8% of unusual aerial sightings throughout my lifetime no longer provides an explanation for what I witnessed. In my opinion, this was a genuine UAP event that warrants further investigation. Yeah, well, and some of us have had even more up close and personal experiences than that. But nothing like seeing one of these things yourself to make you a true believer. That is for sure. This sighting is from October 11th, 2025 at 4:30 a.m. local time. Duration 3 minutes. Observers 1 military/law enforcement officer. Location Lebanon. Location details northeast of Lebanon, Illinois. Shape chevron. Color unknown. Estimated size approximately 20 feet wide. Viewed from land. Direction from viewer northeast. Angle of elevation 70 degrees, approximately 2,000 feet. For the distance, the estimated speed approximately 25 miles per hour. So you're seeing this 20-foot wide chevron-shaped UFO, maybe not quite a quarter to a half mile away. Traveling quite slowly, though, 25 miles per hour. Lights on object. Characteristics, diamond or V-shaped object, approximately 2,000 feet above the ground, moving west from my point of view, just north of Lebanon, Illinois, over Route 4. Silent craft with 4 bright white lights and 1 pulsating craft, light moving slowly northeast of Lebanon. Well, if this thing's 2,000 feet above the ground, then it might be bigger than 20 feet. I don't know. At approximately 4:30 a.m. on October 11th, 2025, I observed an unusual aerial object above my home, northeast of Lebanon. The object appeared to be roughly 2,000 feet in the air and moved slowly across the sky without making any audible sound. It displayed 4 bright white lights arranged in what appeared to be a V-shaped or diamond-shaped formation, along with a single green light that pulsed rhythmically near the center or rear of the object. The lights remained consistent in brightness and position as the object moved. The craft appeared too large and too slow to be a conventional airplane, and it produced no detectable noise, even though the surrounding area was extremely quiet. It also did not display the standard red and green navigation lights typically associated with aircraft. The object continued along a steady flight path before disappearing from view. Sounds like it was just kind of moseying along there and just flew off into the sunset, I guess, or maybe sunrise at 4:30 a.m. This sighting's dated August 4th, 2025, 4:30 a.m. Another one at 4:30 in the morning. Observed 1 to 2 minutes. Observers 1, location Chicago. Location details flying east and low over Lake Michigan, approximately 100 to 200 feet above the surface. Imagine that, looking at your window and seeing this thing flying just above the lake. Shape cigar, color gray-black. Estimated size approximately 100 feet long. Viewed from land, direction from viewer northeast. Angle of elevation 45 degrees. Closest distance approximately 1/2 to 1 mile away. Speed approximately 100 miles per hour. Characteristic lights on object. Cigar-shaped object with dim and red lights running along the entire body. Flying low and east over Lake Michigan near Chicago. I live in a high-rise building next to Lake Michigan in Chicago. There is an unobstructed view of the lake and sky from every window in my home, and we frequently see and hear many different types of aircraft traveling to and from Midway International Airport and O'Hare International Airport. Yeah, they're on the Chicago Lake Drive. That must be quite a view out that window. I woke up at approximately 4:15 a.m. and immediately noticed the brilliant appearance of Venus and Jupiter due east, despite some remaining haze from recent wildfire smoke. The skies were otherwise empty and quiet. I stood by the window to further appreciate the sight of the planets when I noticed a strange aircraft, unlike anything I had ever seen in this area. It was flying low, slowly, and seemingly silent over Lake Michigan, heading east. The object was grayish-black, cigar or cylinder-shaped, with dim red lights extending along the length of the craft. It continued moving eastward, and unlike a conventional aircraft, it appeared to simply fade away from view. Wow, what a sighting. I mean, boy, do I envy this person up there hanging out in their skyscraper apartment looking out over Lake Michigan and see this really amazing 100-foot long cigar-shaped UFO talking about these red lights running on the side of the craft. And like I said, it just kind of disappears from view. There again, almost as if they're coming in and out of our dimension. Yeah, what a neat sighting. This sighting is dated July 15th, 2025 at approximately 9:30 p.m. local time. Duration 2 seconds. Observers 1. Location Shelbyville. Location details northwest side of Shelbyville. Shape teardrop. Color dark gray. Estimated size approximately 25 feet long by 5 feet wide. Viewed from land. Direction from viewer east-southeast. Angle of elevation 40 degrees. Closest distance approximately 500 to 1,000 feet. Speed several hundred miles per hour. Extremely fast and silent. As I was sitting in my hot tub listening to podcasts, I was facing directly southeast and looking at the sky at approximately a 40-degree angle. Coming from the east-southeast, silhouetted against the glow of light pollution in the sky, I observed a teardrop-shaped object moving west-northwest at an incredible speed. I could faintly make out a gray coloration on the underside of the object, which I assumed was caused by city lights reflecting off the bottom surface. The object traveled in a perfectly straight line with zero deviation, zero sound, and zero vibration. It passed over the tree canopy approximately 150 yards southeast of my position, moved behind my neighbor's tree at about 50 yards to the south, and disappeared over another tree canopy approximately 130 yards to my west-southwest. It moved so fast and so smoothly that my eyes had difficulty tracking it. The object displayed no lights and left no trail. It appeared only as a dark silhouette. Afterward, I replayed the event repeatedly in my mind to make sure it was not a bat, bird, or insect. I compared its trajectory and speed to my viewing angle and the surrounding trees I used as reference points. It was definitely airborne and likely around 200 to 300 feet above the ground. At arm's length, when I held my fingers up as though pinching the object out of the sky, it appeared to measure roughly 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch long and 1/8 to 3/16 of an inch tall from my perspective. The trailing end appeared slightly longer and sharper than the leading end. I wish I had captured it on video, although it is unlikely my camera would have detected the silhouette clearly. It was probably the coolest and most confusing moment of my life. Yeah, I guess I could see why. Sitting out there in your hot tub and look up and see this thing. Pretty amazing. We'll do 3 more here and wrap this up. This sighting goes back to November 17th, 2023, 12:58 p.m. local time. Duration 6 to 8 seconds. Observers 1. Location Lincolnshire, Illinois. Location details side front yard of a residential property above a smaller tree approximately 50 feet tall and near a power line. Shape other color white. Estimated size approximately 8 feet by 20 feet viewed from land. Direction from viewer driving due east with the craft position above, upward and to the right. Angle of elevation 40 degrees. Closest distance approximately 180 feet. Characteristics aircraft nearby. The craft was completely stationary and totally silent, hovering just above a tree. I was driving home with my wife, seated beside me, when I spotted something above and ahead of us near the road. As we approached, my angle of view became steeper. I then turned into the driveway, which caused me to lose sight of the object. I jumped out of the car, grabbed my phone from my pocket, and ran toward the street, intending to take a photograph, but the object had completely disappeared by the time I reached the road. I scanned the sky and saw only a smaller private jet, which was also white. What interested me most was the jet's flight path. Its movement was curved, placing me and anything directly above me near the center of the semicircular route it appeared to be following. It is possible that someone aboard the aircraft may have also seen what I had just observed. I have a series of photographs documenting the curved flight path I described. I estimate the object's size to have been approximately 8 to 20 feet. The entire craft had a matte white finish with no visible markings of any kind. When I first spotted the object, I focused on what I interpreted to be the front end. From my vantage point, it appeared to be a perfect sphere. There were no windows and the surface looked completely seamless. My attention then shifted to a platform-like structure attached to the sphere. I focused particularly on what appeared to be panels along the side of the platform. I was struck by the symmetry of the structure. Two panels hanging below the main body were exactly the same dimensions as two panels directly above them. Most of my observations of the underside were made through peripheral vision, although I did briefly focus on it directly. I left the underside largely unaddressed on my drawing, but I know there was additional structure present there. I believe I observed a tubular component seamlessly molded into the bottom, extending from the front to the rear of the platform like a half-round surface. I also had the impression that there were two additional extensions beneath the opposite side of the craft, protruding below the main body. The lower panels did not extend downward as my drawing suggests, but I have struggled to accurately reproduce the proportions. There is no doubt in my mind that the sphere and platform were connected, although because my attention shifted quickly between different parts of the craft, I cannot say with certainty exactly how those sections transitioned into one another. I am willing to share additional information with interested parties, although I understand that may be of limited usefulness unless other witnesses come forward. Most of the leaves were still on the trees at the time of the sighting. The craft was positioned just above the smallest of the larger trees on the right side of the street, shown in the photograph, using a nearby utility pole, which I estimate to be about 45 feet tall as a reference point. I estimate the craft was approximately 60 feet above the ground. The object appeared nestled among the trees, although it was clearly not touching them or any surrounding structures. As stated earlier, it remained stationary and completely silent. Although my wife was present during the event, she was focused on her device and apparently did not react when I asked, "What is that?" As we approached the object, she later claimed to have had her own sighting on November 22nd, which she hopefully will report separately. Wow, that is wild. Very, very cool. This sighting happened on November 14th, 2023, 11 p.m., duration 20 minutes, observers 3, location Chicago, location details above a 7-Eleven and neighboring apartment building. Shape cigar, color red, whitish, orange, size approximately 90 feet, viewed from land, direction from viewer west, angle of elevation 45 degrees, closest distance approximately 1,250 to 1,500 feet, speed up to 600 miles per hour. Characteristics: lights on object or haze around object. I observed a cigar-shaped craft with 4 lights on the underside, emitting a blue haze from beneath the object. I observed 2 separate craft, one approaching from the southwest and another hovering approximately 1,500 feet away near my building. I was in the middle of playing guitar and drums, and I had just exited the bathroom when I went to close the window and blinds. From my angle, I had a clear view of the 7-Eleven across the train tracks adjacent to my building. At that moment, I saw a cigar-shaped craft with 4 lights on its underside. A blue haze or glow was being emitted from the bottom of the object. I became extremely alarmed and yelled for my neighbors to look out the window. The craft remained visible long enough for others to observe it as well. It eventually descended behind the building next to the 7-Eleven. The object later disappeared and no one observed it flying away. However, while we were waiting and watching the area, a second craft approached from the southwest. This second object moved erratically and did not maneuver like any traditional propelled aircraft I have ever seen. Both craft appeared capable of horizontal flight, as well as vertical takeoff and landing. The propulsion source seemed to originate from the underside of the craft, where the blue glow was visible. The glow resembled the blue illumination emitted by submerged uranium fuel rods in a nuclear power plant cooling pool, or the glow of a tesseract depicted in the Avengers. A blue glow emanated from the underside of both craft throughout the sighting. I know a little bit about this blue glow. I mean, definitely the one I saw. We hear about this blue glow, though, in a lot of these things, and I'm just not sure what it means. We'll do one last one here. This next flight is one of my favorites that I like to follow up on. These are the airline observations. Someone's in an airplane, especially a commercial airplane, and they see one of these UFOs. Very cool stuff. This one happened on September 1st, 2023, 5:08 p.m. Says duration 15 seconds, location Chicago. Details viewed from American Airlines Flight 1614 during final approach at approximately 8,000 to 10,000 feet altitude. Shape orb, characteristics lights on object or haze around object, aircraft nearby. Airline passenger observed a non-drone UAP during landing approach to O'Hare International Airport on September 1st, 2024. And then it says flight aware AA flight 1614. So they have the flight listed here. You can look it up. On September 1st, 2023, shortly after 5 p.m. and in full daylight, I was a passenger aboard American Airlines Flight 1614. My flight was traveling westbound after completing a 180-degree banking turn over Lake Michigan during final approach. At that time, I observed a smoky, silver, metallic object traveling eastward toward the lake at a slightly lower altitude, approximately 300 feet north of our aircraft. 300 feet coming in for approach, that's nothing. I estimated the altitude to have been between 8,000 and 10,000 feet. Our aircraft was south of Howard Street, and the object was north of our flight path. We were flying just west of the McDonald's in Evanston near Howard Street.